What's up, newsers? It's the Russian dude. There are moments in history when fear stops being a wall and turns into a mirror. A mirror that shows people who they truly are, what they truly believe, and what they can no longer pretend to ignore. For years, the Kremlin survived not because Russians loved the system, but because they feared challenging it. Fear was the glue that held everything together. Fear was the currency of the state. Fear was the unspoken rule nobody questioned. Protesters were beaten, parents were arrested for comments online, teenagers were jailed for memes, the entire internet was censored, all so one man could just sleep peacefully in his bunker. And for a while the fear worked, but fear also exhausts people. It drains them, grinds them down, wears them out of their nerves, and one day it simply stops working. It becomes too familiar, too predictable, too repetitive to shock anyone anymore. And that is exactly what is happening inside Russia right now. You can silence a square, but you cannot silence a kitchen. You can shut down a street, but you cannot shut down a thought, simple thought. And right now, thoughts inside Russia are louder than they have ever been. For years, Putin's regime relied on repression as casually as one man relies on morning coffee. A protest, shut it down. A complaint online, just find them. A teenager with a meme, once again just jail him. Someone holding even a blank sheet of paper, arrest them on sight. Meanwhile, the same propagandists who build their careers on hatred, threats and fear-mongering can say whatever they want without consequences. One set of rules for the elites, another set just for the regular people. And it's not just hypocrisy, this is fuel. This is what inflames the quiet resentment that has been simmering across Russia. This is what transforms passive frustration into active defiance. Because unfair treatment does something propaganda cannot counter. It creates emotion. Deep, lasting, uncontrollable emotion. And once people feel something strongly enough, fear becomes irrelevant. So today, let's talk about how this shift began, why Russians are finally losing that paralyzing fear, and what it means for the future of this entire system. Because once a population stops being afraid, regimes built on fear begin to crumble from the inside. The first cracks did not appear in the streets. They appeared in private conversations, in whispers and text messages between friends, in the sights of parents, in the questions children ask at dinner. Fear began to crumble not when people suddenly became brave, but when the cost of compliance became unbearable. For decades, Russians were taught that obedience brings safety. Don't question anything, don't question the state, don't go into politics, you'll be fine. Avoid trouble, keep your head down, don't speak up, and life will quietly just move forward without you. But the war shattered that illusion. People who did everything correctly still got conscription notices. Men with no political opinions, like Kremlin asked them, still got dragged into the draft offices. Parents who supported the government still saw their sons sent to the front lines. Ordinary families still lost jobs, savings, and futures. And so suddenly, silence no longer guaranteed safety. The biggest psychological shift happened when people realized it. It does not matter what you believe, the machine will still come after you. You could be loyal, neutral, apolitical, it makes no difference. The system takes whoever it wants and destroys whoever is convenient or inconvenient for them. And then came the censorship. First it was websites, then social media pages, then VPNs, then entire platforms. Russians watched as their digital world shrunk year after year. They were told it was for national security, but what national security is threatened by someone holding a no-war sign, right? What national security collapses when a school teacher says she is tired of violence? What national security needs to crush a teenager for a meme? The absurdity becomes too obvious to ignore, and then came the blank sheets even. The ultimate symbol of the regime's fear, if you ask me. When police officers began arresting people for holding a piece of paper with nothing written on it, literally. Even those who supported the government felt something crack inside. Because how fragile must your system be if it cannot even survive a blank page? If inkless protests terrifies your leaders, how strong are your leaders really are then? Fear started to lose its sacred aura as a result. People saw the machinery of the repression up close, and it did not look powerful anymore. It looked ridiculous. It looked insecure. It looked even scared. And people are always less afraid of something that looks more terrified than it really is. We mentioned there are also two sets of laws inside of Russia. One is for the elites and another one is for everyone else. Because this is a crucial thing to realize if we want to understand the mindset of Russians losing fear. So, let's talk about it in more details in our next chapter. Fear collapses fastest when people are forced to live inside a double standard so blatant, it literally burns their eyes. Propagandists can threaten nuclear strikes on live television, officials can steal millions, flee the country and return without consequences, governors' children can party in Dubai while soldiers die in trenches outside of Avdiivka, politicians can say the most outrageous, violent, openly extremist nonsense, and nothing happens. Meanwhile, a regular person can simply stand outside Kremlin in blue and yellow clothes, and that's it. The police will descend like a swarm of bees on this person. It's that contrast that Russians no longer tolerate. It's that feeling of being humiliated, treated like livestock, lied to so openly that the lies themselves begin to feel like insults. Fear does not protect a regime when the repression becomes this uneven. Instead, it exposes the system for what it is, a hierarchy of untouchable above and expendables below. And when people finally understand where they stand in that hierarchy, anger replaces fear, obviously. Think about a potential scenario some of you might have even experienced in your life. If there is a boot-licking coworker who you know is not working nearly hard enough to deserve all the promotions he or she gets, while you keep your same role for years, eventually this boils over into an open frustration. Then you realize you're not alone. Other coworkers dislike that person as well, and so you start talking in the break rooms, next to water coolers, in text messages. The frustration grows until it can just simply no longer hold. All is missing is just a simple trigger, whatever. Another promotion, bootlicker mocking somebody or complaining how hard his work is, and then that's it, you explode. Either in his face or you just go speak to the management, but something happens. And it is at this moment when you have no longer fear, you act on emotions. And if people around you feel the same way, this is when collective frustration prevails, making senior management finally start questioning their past decisions. So yeah, you get the idea, so now let's get back to the Russia as a country scenario. Another source of frustration is the endless tease of peace. Kremlin officials constantly drop hints about upcoming negotiations, ceasefire proposals, historic agreements, and possible diplomatic breakthroughs, and every time they do this, millions of Russians feel just a tiny spark of hope. Not as much as before, but still, there is something. Maybe the war will end, maybe conscription will stop, maybe life will normalize, maybe the sons will come home. And every time that hope is taken away, over and over again, the government just gives people something to cling to and then just rips it away. Hope is a very dangerous thing to manipulate, because once people feel betrayed enough times, that disappointment turns into fury. Those who lost sons, those whose relatives are stuck on the front lines, those who feel the economic pain of endless war, they experience each broken promise like a personal knife in their backs. There is only so many times you can say soon before people stop believing you. There's only so many times you can lie before people start hating you. And there's just so many times you can erase hope before people begin to see you as the obstacle to their survival. And so once again people started talking. First with the people they trust the most, husbands, wives, parents, children. And as soon as they feel safe, they expand this inner circle of trustees. And that launches the inevitable process of dissent. Let's talk about it in our next chapter. For decades, Russians used kitchens as sanctuaries. The one place in the entire country where people could speak freely. You close the door, pour tea, lower your voice, and, suddenly the truth comes out. It is precisely where Soviet citizens whispered their real opinions, where families debated everything from corruption to food shortages, where people complained about the party, about the state, about the police, all in just these harsh, silent tones. Today, the kitchens are louder, much louder. People have reached a point where the fear is no longer outweighing the frustration. Ordinary Russians sit at tables and talk about the war with confidence now. They talk about corruption, mobilization, deaths, broken promises, stolen money, and even the absurdity of propaganda, especially, I would even say, about the absurdity of propaganda. That's what unites us all, if you ask me. They don't whisper anymore, they speak. And when fear weakens in the kitchen, it eventually leaks into the workplaces, streets, taxi rides, grocery lines, and classroom corridors. Anti-war jokes are becoming bolder. Anti-government sarcasm is becoming more common. People openly mock the slogans they once repeated. They make fun of the new patriotic curriculum. They laugh at propaganda broadcasts. And laughter is one of the biggest threats to the authoritarian system. Because when you don't take them seriously, this is when everything falls apart. When the people start mocking the regime loses its magic. And then comes the most dangerous shift of them all. People are beginning to believe that repression cannot catch everyone. If 1 million people complain online, well, police just cannot jail every single one of them, cannot jail 1 million people. If thousands of people talk openly against the war, they cannot arrest thousands. If entire neighborhoods whisper the same frustrations, it's no longer an isolated thought, it's a movement at this point. This is precisely how eras end, not with revolutions in the streets, but with hundreds and thousands of small persons' acts of courage. The kind that accumulate until fear simply cannot compete. Authoritarian regimes collapse not when the opposition grows strong, but when the population stops being afraid. Fear is not infinite. It requires maintenance. It requires consistency. It requires psychological pressure and unpredictability. And right now, the Kremlin's fear machinery is malfunctioning. Every arrest for a blank sheet, every teenager jailed for a meme, and every grandmother fined for a comment in a chat makes the system look weaker, not stronger. Repression becomes self-parody. The war has accelerated this transformation. Russians see the double standards everywhere. Mobilization applies to them, but not to the sons of the officials. Peace is promised so often it has become a joke at this point. Prices rise while oligarchs grow richer, propaganda grows louder while trust collapses. And as the gap between reality and rhetoric widens, fear steps aside and anger takes its place. Some Russians, however, are still cautious, still hesitant, unsure, but, well, hesitation is not fear. It's preparation, it's calculation. And the more people sense that others share their frustration, the more confident they become. A society's fear begins to erode the moment people stop feeling alone in their descent. And right now, millions inside Russia feel less alone than at any point in the last 20 years. They cannot catch all of us is no longer a slogan, it's a psychological awakening. People are starting to understand that repression only works when it is targeted. When everyone becomes a target, repression loses its effect, simple as that. When people realize the police cannot fight the entire nation, and they simply can't, physically, they begin to act differently. They start speaking, they start questioning, they start thinking, they start resisting in ways small but meaningful. And when millions act in these small ways, these ways becomes huge. The awakening has begun. And once people awaken, they do not want to go back to sleep. Well, there you have it, guys. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to my channel for more news like this. If you wish to support our work, the links down below. Thanks much for watching. See you tomorrow. We won't succumb to their tricks, the facade they try to sell. Their twisted words and feeble claims on us all they cannot quell. We see through their lies, their feeble attempts to sway. We do not believe